Welcome to the session. My name is Prashant Sarin. I'm a senior partner with Bain and Company. I lead our advanced manufacturing and services practice across Asia Pacific and our energy business in India. I'm delighted to be your moderator for this important session on India, a blueprint of energy transition for emerging economies. And it's a privilege to welcome you to this vital dialogue with Mr. Pankaj Jain, Secretary to the Government of India, Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. Pankaj really needs no introduction, especially to this audience. He has wide-ranging and extensive experience in governance as well as design and execution of policy across national and many state governments, across oil and natural gas, financial services, industries, power, information technology, livelihoods, and MSME promotion, with extensive board experience in many companies in these areas. Pankaj, thank you for making the time today. I want to kick off with a few opening remarks. We find ourselves at a critical juncture in history. India, as we know, is poised to be the fastest growing large economy globally, with a GDP growth rate of over 7%. This means we translate from the $3 trillion GDP to a $7 trillion with doubling of per capita incomes and an even faster increase in consumption. This will drive a very high requirement for energy and energy intensity for all of our citizens. In addition, we're all aware of many recent geopolitical events that are adding significant risks, and therefore the need to de-risk India's energy demand has never been higher. And then finally, we're in the midst of a once-in-a-lifetime transformation as we move from fossil fuel-based economies to a much more cleaner, much more sustainable sources of energy. And so as you put all of this together, you can think of India's energy trilemma: affordability, security, and sustainability. And what's fascinating for us living in India is that it's not just India that needs to get this right. The world needs India to get this right. And it needs to happen in an equitable way. We've, of course, made tremendous progress under the auspices of MOPNG and the oil and gas companies, our PSU Navratnas, and the private sector. As we're diversifying our energy mix, we're driving energy security, we're focusing on sustainable, renewable sources of energy, including initiatives like the Global Biofuels Alliance. In many sectors, we're not just building India for India, but we're also building, I believe, India for the world. Therefore, it's crucial to consider the lessons that the world can learn, the emerging markets can learn from our experience. Equally, I'm sure we continue to be humble and are willing to listen and learn from the best around the world. In our conversation today, over the next few minutes, I hope to touch on several of these important dimensions. Pankaj, India is the fastest growing major economy globally. Our energy demand is expected to double by 2045. How should we think about balancing our growing energy needs as we transition to cleaner alternatives?
Yeah, thanks, Prashant. The thing is this. Transition is something which all of us as nations are committed to. We all have an end goal in terms of what net zero looks like, what net zero will be. Dates can differ. But I think we need to clearly recognize that pathways will be uniquely national. Now, when pathways are uniquely national and solutions are also, in a sense, completely idiosyncratic, what is going to happen in India's case, and that's what trends currently would tend to suggest, that our reliance on multiple fuels in this transition is going to be absolutely a given. So yes, coal will continue to matter, oil will continue to matter, as will gas. But then we have to start learning to operate and work with additional fuels. So whether it's ethanol, it's compressed biogas, it's renewable DME, it's biodiesel. In doing so, what we have to attempt is that at the end customer, the movement from one fuel to another has to be as least disruptive as possible. It should not mean unnecessary investments for equipment to use that fuel. It should not mean throwing out things which still have economic life left. We allow things to go to economic life, use them to the way we use them typically, and at the same time, we make sure that costs remain well in control. So the affordability part in the transition really comes into play, but alongside what also matters is there cannot be excessive dependence on any one source, because no one source we will be able to ensure enough of it domestically. We will continue to import, as it ought to be that yes, we trade with the rest of the world, but we are not so critically dependent that if it shuts off, we don't know what to do.
No, that's, thanks for sharing those perspectives. Absolutely critical. And I love your point about India will be different. And it's important for us to listen and learn from what the world is doing, but our pathway will certainly be different and idiosyncratic. Just touching a little bit on, you mentioned affordability, and before this session, when we were chatting, we talked about the importance of affordability and accessibility. I'd love to hear a little bit more on how you're looking to balance these twin requirements, especially in a country like India, and especially as the need for energy is only going to increase for retail consumers, for commercial and industrial customers.
So I think as far as availability is concerned, let me start with availability. There are two elements to it. Diversifying sources from where you get your fuel, both domestically and internationally. As far as affordability is concerned, we currently have a mix of administered prices and market prices. Now, market prices work best when there is competition. We cannot have a situation where we allow monopolies to get created in any one fuel entity, and that really has been the intent of policy.
Yeah.
That let competition play out. Competition alone within the domestic market and a wider basket of sourcing is what makes affordability happen.
Understood. The other question I had for you, and you touched on this, the importance of diversifying our energy mix and not relying on any one particular type of fuel. We've obviously set an aspirational target of creating 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. We're making very strong strides there. Question number one is, what role do you envisage for gas, in this mix? And it's absolutely critical as we go from 6% to 13 or 15. We'd love to hear more about gas and the plans for gas.
So look, I think for a variety of reasons, gas got a bad name in India. It's a bit of a pity, but I think we are past that now. With the kind of LNG terminal infrastructure that we have, with the kind of pipeline network we have, with the kind of new discoveries which are getting reported and new facilities coming into production, some of the unmet demand for gas in India, which has also been a function of price, could over the next 3 to 4 years start becoming much more visible. And let me illustrate this. Today, there is very little gas which is going into thermal power generation. But we also have assets which were built around using gas.
Yeah.
Is there a way by which we can get these assets back into play? It will mean that maybe our contracting arrangements around gas have to be rethought. Maybe risk-sharing mechanisms around price fluctuation have to be renegotiated or reworked or reimagined between suppliers of gas and such industrial buyers. Again, there will be areas where gas is not simply a fuel, but gas is actually an input to the whole production process, and you cannot produce, for example, you can't produce fertilizer without using gas. So those are the areas where we have to get the pricing right, because that use of gas is not going to disappear. And in mobility, as well as in getting pipe gas to households, those really are going to be some of the big demand drivers for gas.
It's wonderful to hear this notion, the importance of gas, but I'd say in particular, the openness of the government to look at some of the old assets and be willing to look at some of the old contracts will be music to the ears of many that have got, we're looking for some policy reform or redress from that perspective. What role do you see from international players? The India Energy Week is a fascinating opportunity, obviously, for many IOCs and NOCs around the world to visit. What measures are we taking to further encourage global private sector involvement in the India energy industry?
So the first big thing is that, look, this is emerging as the center of demand.
Absolutely.
So if you are not here, you are missing a trick. I mean, if you have a molecule to sell, if you're not selling to India, I'm sorry, then you're not in the market. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, depending on the molecule, what we have also learned is that there are a lot of arbitrage opportunities which are existing around the world, even in markets where we thought that this is the marker and that's what it is. So if you start unpacking the marker and you start digging deeper, we are finding that there are deals which can happen much below the marker. So we encourage such private players to come and talk to us. We reach out to them, we send out teams, and we try, our companies try and close such deals. The third thing is looking at tweaks in our policy frameworks which eliminate some of the risks which some of, say, let us say an exploration and production company might have, or they may be conditioned by something which happened 25 years ago, 30 years ago, and memories run long in these kind of things. So if we can reassure them that India is a different place to do business. So that is something which has been a very conscious effort. So including, for example, removal of restrictions on no-go area for 1 million square kilometers. That was precisely done, timing it with the next 2 rounds of the open acreage licensing policy. Again, there are success stories of international companies in India. So there is some evangelization which we do around that as well.
And that's fantastic, because when we speak with our clients around the world, what's very clear is that India is absolutely a hotspot. There's a lot of deep interest, and the conversation in their mind really is, it's not if, it's when. And there is real keenness, given the growth of our economy, not just in oil and gas, but across multiple sectors, that puts peer pressure from their boards, looking for them to explore the Indian market. I'd love to shift gears a little bit and talk about the role of technology to drive India's energy transition. We'd love to hear from you, any examples or any specific technology innovations that you believe will be critical to achieve our sustainability goals in the energy sector.
Actually, yes. See, the thing is, there is a lot of technology which is available around the world, but a lot of technology is proprietary. Because it's proprietary, we struggle with our procurement systems. We don't like buying proprietary stuff, not simply because the rules don't allow, but also because we have learned it the hard way that proprietary technologies are not great when it comes to any renewals or replacing that technology. So our R&D, in fact, that's what I encourage our oil companies to do much more of. A couple of them are actually pretty good at this, but more of them need to do this. In terms of how do I work with existing stock of vehicles? Can my fuels, as the nature of the fuel changes, will we have to wait till newer vehicles come online? So that's one part of the research. Can I avoid that? Second, what can I do to get more oil or more gas out from the same well? Given that geology is different in each place and each basin, are we learning the lessons which other people have actually cracked much earlier than us? How well placed are we? Third, how good are we at actually surveying things below the ground? So there's a huge role of technology in that, and India has not been the leading edge in that. There are a whole lot of other companies in the world which do this much better than us, and that's where we need to learn from.
And maybe a follow-up question over there, because there's a lot of research around the world. You touched on proprietary technology. There's a lot of indigenous research that's taking place.
Yes.
And especially as you walk around the India Energy Week halls, anything that struck you or anything that you'd like to highlight? Because there's so much going on from a number of different oil and gas companies, or so the Indian Air Force, just fantastic to see.
So look, there's something which you will not see here, which the INMAX technology which Indian Oil brought. I mean, that to my mind was one of the best examples of to go in a refinery outside India and suddenly discover that, look, this is not an Indian refinery, but it's using Indian technology, I mean, you feel rather chuffed about it. So it's not that we can't do it. We have been doing it. But when you go around India Energy Week, you start seeing some unique solutions which, I mean, look at the electrolyzer which BPCL has demonstrated.
It's amazing.
I mean, and maybe many of you missed it, but there was a Kirloskar generator just in the background which actually runs on diesel and hydrogen. So you could, for every hydrogen molecule you generate here, that can go into a generator and replace diesel which you're using there. Now,
Fantastic.
so these are areas which excite you. And this I'm talking to the big guys. Look at what are some of the work which some of the startups are doing, some of which you'll probably interact with tomorrow as well. The kind of solutions that they have come up with. I mean, you keep wondering, this is so simple, why did you not think of it earlier? So it's actually a very, very exciting time to be in this space in technology.
No, that's exactly right, Pankaj. Often when we speak to young people, I'll say there has never been a more exciting time to be an Indian in India. And I think it's particularly true for the energy transition. And the ability and the opportunity to build a 20, 30-year career for yourself, but also more importantly, build for the country, build for India. And I think that's exceptional. And if I use that point to segue to the next one, a topic that I know is very close to your heart around biofuels. And we were in a meeting today, earlier in the morning, talking about the Global Biofuels Alliance. And I'd love to get your perspectives as you look at new areas like biofuels, the opportunity, but also a lot of hard work that needs to get done for India to truly script a winning story. Your thoughts?
So look, I think traditionally, the biofuel debate got captured by food versus fuel. The India story has been, without realizing it, without having a grand policy design behind it, how we have probably neatly sidestepped that debate. Our ethanol was never coming from sugar. Our ethanol was coming from what was left after making sugar.
Yeah.
Our ethanol comes from waste, whether it's paddy straw, or it is municipal solid waste, or increasingly to even say off gases helping us produce ethanol. Now when we do that, there will be questions around pricing. Is it affordable? But again, in this industry, you keep seeing new ways of dealing with higher prices. So if your costs are higher, whether it's blending mandates, whether it is export, there are ways of dealing with higher price because there is a learning curve involved in terms of bringing costs down. What we are trying to do is we are trying to pay remunerative prices to somebody who's giving us feedstock, yet at the same time keeping prices of the end product reasonable. So we will get that balance. It takes us a little time, but during the interim, we will have to use surrogates which allow us to do this.
No, it's fascinating. I think the other part about biogas that personally I think will end up being hopefully a really successful story, but a uniquely Indian one, is the importance of collecting a lot of the waste and converting that to wealth. And I'd love to get thoughts from you as you think about this notion of feedstock and any thoughts you have around India and what we might need to do differently when it comes to feedstock collection.
So look, again, depends on the kind of feedstock. Some years ago, it was unimaginable that municipal solid waste could be segregated. Today, the number of cities where segregated municipal solid waste is available is growing every month. There are entrepreneurs who have actually made it a business, and in fact, one of them is a Goa-based entrepreneur who is now working in Mumbai, doing it at scale, that even if a municipality can't do it, I have a way of doing it for you. Look at how farmers respond to paddy straw and realizing that they can get money for paddy straw. Look at what they are doing for cow manure. Look at, some of the newer changes. Industries, what do you do with expired fruit juice? Expired fruit juice is now going to be used to make ethanol. So in a sense, see, in India nothing gets thrown out. We recycle everything. With that kind of mindset, I think the aggregation part In some cases, it requires mechanization. In another place, it requires more local level entrepreneurs. In a third place, it will require some infrastructure support. We are working on all three.
No, that's fantastic to hear. And I think also having the ability to deal with the multiplicity of feedstock, because that will change too, and we need that ability, or alternative feedstock that might come up will be critical.
In fact, look at it on the customer, on the people who are processing it. It's again fascinating how processing facilities are actually being designed to be flexible to take multiple feedstock. It's a play on seasonality. It's also a play on the fact that any particular year, if it's a bad monsoon, for instance, you could face distress, so plan for it before you design your thing. So now their profitability actually hinges on the fact that they're not worried. It's one risk off the table.
No, that's, it's incredible. And I remember doing a piece of work a long time ago with paper and pulp manufacturer and the importance of bagasse, over there. And of course, you can use bagasse to make furniture, you can use bagasse to make paper, and now of course you can use bagasse to make energy.
Yes.
And a lot of it is about thinking about traditional waste, but now it has multiple use cases. How do we ascribe the right economic value that allows a farmer to actually look at energy generation perhaps as the most lucrative way for him to convert his waste into wealth and also contribute to India's energy security. And that narrative is a powerful narrative. And I remember in the morning the conversation we also had is around the importance of evangelizing the discussion around biofuels, because unlike a lot of other traditional fuels where it's usually larger players, it's companies, it's corporates, governments that are participating, over here it impacts everyone. It impacts everyone, and it could be truly equitable in the way we think about biofuels, growth, security and wealth.
No, but there's another fascinating aspect to it, which is this. Production facilities for biofuels in India, who has driven this change? It's not the big guys, the big companies of India. You look at who are the ethanol producers, who are the CBG producers. It's actually, many of them were small and medium-sized enterprises. They led it. It's only now that the bigger players have discovered that yes, there is an opportunity here. And they are the ones who are now saying, okay, I'll set up 100 CBG plants, or I'll set up CBG plants at scale. But I mean, the way the market got developed was actually a lot of unsung heroes and heroines who made this happen.
And many more we will discover.
Many more we'll discover.
Moving on to, I did want to talk about the oil and gas majors, our PSUs, and they're playing an absolutely critical role to secure our energy supply in India. I have a couple of questions around this theme. The first one was around decarbonization, which I know the ministry is thinking very deeply about. I'd love to hear a little bit about the steps, actions taken to decarbonize today, but also importantly, how do you see their decarbonization agenda evolving over the next few years?
So I think the first thing which we should always talk about is the decarbonization effort for which they got very little credit. It had partly to do with the fact that it happened around COVID, or when COVID just started. But the movement of India is probably the only country where all fuel is Euro 6 standard. Now, Euro 6 itself meant decarbonization. Every vehicle, emissions getting reduced. We never took credit. The fact that in 10 years, LPG connections went up from 14 crore to 32 crore meant that decarbonization was happening. There were less emissions originating from households. Again, we did not take adequate credit on the decarb. We took credit for other things, but not on the decarbonization part. But having said that, today, their decarbonization efforts, one is the sheer amount of money that they're throwing at the problem. So we're looking at investments of almost 4 lakh crores in the next few years, which they're doing. Now, those are the usual suspects. So, you'll do more of renewables, you'll do more of tree plantation, you will convert this, do more of biofuels, all that is fine. But efficiency improvements within refineries, cutting down on making, looking at zero flaring of zero avoidable flaring, looking at zero methane emissions, looking at carbon capture, which yes, it's a newer field for them, but their openness to do this is actually giving me the confidence that when they talk of scope 1 and scope 2 emissions becoming nil in the next decade between 2030 to 2040, I have a feeling that they are underestimating their own abilities. They'll probably get there much faster.
And we need them. We need them to get there much faster. Yes. One other question, beyond decarbonization, all of them are taking increasingly important steps to truly participate in the energy transition. Love to get your thoughts as you think about the agenda for them. And I know you were talking about the importance of segregating them because E&P versus the larger OMCs, everyone has a different agenda. But from your lens, would love to get a view of over the next 5 years, what should their agenda be? What is their agenda? What advice would you have?
So look, I will not give generic advice.
Yes.
Advice will have to be tailored to a company's peculiar situation. I can't compare an IOCL with 11 refineries with a BPCL or an HPCL with 2 or 3 refineries. There are different opportunities which exist for an IOCL. They have a different set of entities which they're already partnering with. But a few things are given. They have to ensure, and this I'm talking only of the oil marketing companies, they have to keep ensuring availability. That is absolutely non-negotiable. Come what may, availability has to be ensured. However, having said that, it's like, you have to fix a plane while you're flying it.
Oh, for sure.
So you have to keep working on things, what it means for your business, what will your business look 5 years down the line, what will it look 7 years down the line. So some of those things will involve making investments now, even if they're not giving you returns now. And let me say this, our oil marketing companies are used to that. It takes 5 years or 7 years to build a refinery. It probably takes it 10 years from the time they start thinking about a refinery. While they'll do it faster, but they do know that they will not be making money for the first 5 to 7 years. And even after the refinery starts, for a couple of years, they're not going to make money. So they understand that's a patient game. Oil and gas, whether it's exploration or refining, is a game of patience. Because they understand this, they should actually be making those investments which will drive their businesses in the next decade.
No, thanks for that. And at Bain, we often talk about the importance of engine 1 versus engine 2 businesses. If you know if you own GC, you're traditional E&P business. But of course, you have to think about, and that generates the majority of your revenues and margin. But you've got to take that revenues and margin and in a thoughtful, deliberate way, allocate capital to engine 2 businesses, which will be the future drivers of revenue and margin. And this is particularly important in India, given the needs and the requirements that all of our oil and gas PSUs support. So this notion of changing engines mid-air is an absolutely critical one around engine 1 and engine 2, and I think also provides a great deal of excitement within the oil and gas companies that not only are you thinking constantly about process efficiencies and driving greater improvements, you actually are in this phase where they're all looking at launching multiple new businesses and providing very exciting opportunities to people in those companies. So it's a fascinating time.
It is. And I haven't even started on Petchem, which is another big business line, which is, and yes, today seems a bad time to invest in Petchem, but it's not always going to remain that. With the long lead time that Petchem involves, it gives refineries the flexibility that as and when automotive fuels taper off, you have another stream which is coming up, and it gives you time to master this business. Because what you are seeing, just as we are today the demand center for crude, we could, if we play our cards right, we will be not just the demand center, but also the production center for a lot of things. So a lot of refined products which come from crude oil will probably be available only in 5 or 6 countries of the world, in the next 15 years. So if you are a country which doesn't have a refinery, you will end up coming to India. If you are a country which does not have a petchem cracker, you will end up coming to India. So you have to start imagining that kind of situation.
Pankaj, thank you. I can't believe the time's already up. This has been a thoroughly enjoyable conversation, and I can say the 30 minutes just flew by. Thank you for the shared optimism. Thank you for the perspective that India will be a leader but will chart its own way. And thank you for the flexibility as we're thinking about navigating the energy transition and making sure we truly deliver equitable growth across India. Thank you.
Thank you very much.